Stop trying to figure everything out. I know that probably sounds strange coming from someone who helps people make decisions and solve problems, but one of the biggest things I've learned in my own life is that I don't have to have everything figured out. And when I look back at some of the biggest things I've done, I didn't know how to do most of them when I started. I knew the next step. I think that's where a lot of people get stuck. They think they need to know the whole plan before they can move. They want to get all their ducks in a row. They want to know how everything's going to work, what could go wrong, what they're going to do if it does, and they keep trying to figure everything out. And I'm not saying we shouldn't plan. Obviously, we should. I'm not saying we shouldn't get information or look at the risks or think through consequences. I do all those things. But there's a difference between being responsible and believing everything depends on me. And I think I've learned the difference through the way that I've lived my life. I've done a lot of things that I wasn't necessarily qualified to do when I started doing them. I wasn't always an entrepreneur. I was a stay-at-home mom for a while. I spent years in ministry. I was in administration in a private school. And it didn't really matter where I was. If I saw something that needed to be done, I had a tendency to know how to solve problems that came across my desk. At the school, there were students who needed additional education support, so I helped create a program for them. There wasn't an after-school program, so I created one of those. The school had moved from one town to another, and there were processes and procedures that needed to be put in place, so I helped do that. And I didn't just want to solve the immediate problem. I wanted to create something that other people could use. I wanted it to continue working when I wasn't there anymore. I didn't have language for this back then, but today someone might call that being an intrapreneur. I was working for somebody else, but I was approaching things in much the same way an entrepreneur would. I saw problems and thought, what can we do to put something in place that solves this, not just for now, but in the long term? That's really the pattern I've used throughout my life. I didn't know the whole plan. When I started on radio, I had no idea where it was going. I knew the next step, go on air. And that was it. That opened another door for me. I ended up filling in for the radio host on American Family Radio locally when he went on vacation. And then I had my own segment once a week. And then eventually it became 5 days a week, 13 segments a week. And later I started my own station. Over the years, we reached tens of thousands of people around the world, and I have about 1,000 archive shows from that amazing season. But I didn't know any of that when I started. Every step of the way, I had to find the next person. I had to find anchors for different segments. I had to learn what worked. I didn't even know what the emphasis of my show was going to be in the beginning. I discovered it. And then I started seeing all these different people who were available to have on the show. Eventually, a pattern arose that made perfect sense. I could see what was supposed to be happening. I could see what it was becoming. I discerned it. But I couldn't see it ahead of time. And I think that's an important thing to understand, because sometimes we don't see the entire thing at the beginning. And we probably would have been too afraid if we did. Or we would have thought that we'd have to figure out how all of it was going to happen. And I didn't do that. I discovered the plan as I went along. And I've done that over and over again in other ventures. I wrote and recorded 2 original worship CDs. I never went through that process before. I wasn't walking around thinking I'm a songwriter and I'm a recording artist. I need to figure out how people do this. I was inspired in a direction and I moved. There were people with a lot more experience and education than I had, but I stepped out in faith believing it would work for me. I was actually compelled to do it. I felt it was part of my assignment. And those CDs ended up selling thousands of copies from Canada to Florida, and my music ended up on the radio in Puerto Rico and in American Family Radio, and there was an article on me in Worship Leader magazine. Another thing I used to do was I used to paint oils. I had an art teacher and a mentor who had painted for years, and she went to art school. She did art shows and set up tents and all the things that normally artists do to sell their work, and I didn't do any of it. I would post my paintings on social media just to share what I was doing, and people would say, I love it, can I buy it? And I'd say, sure. And so I learned that I don't necessarily have to follow a conventional path. And that doesn't mean I ignore what works. That can be very helpful. I did look at how successful people were doing things. I learned from them, and I took what made sense and used it for myself. But I didn't have to copy them. I could make it my own. And that's something I help people understand too. You can actually do something in a way that actually fits who you are, your priorities, your season of life, your finances, your relationships, your health and well-being. Because if the way you're doing something is destroying everything else that's important to you, I think we have to ask whether it's really working. Because progress doesn't have to be perfect. When I first started doing radio, I tried to make it perfect. I remember doing my first show with about 7 pages of notes. I was reading them. Then I listened back to the show and thought, I hate this. I sound like I'm reading notes. And I prayed about it. I was like, God, I can't do it this way. This is not going to work for me. And if I have to do it this way, I don't want to. And what really came to my heart was that the most important thing was why I was doing this. And it was about connecting with people and just really caring about them and communicating things that would be helpful to them. And so I talked to them like I was talking to a friend, and I genuinely did want to help them. So I stopped bringing all those notes and caring so much about how I sounded and how people might think about me. And I'd go in sometimes with just a title or maybe an article I read that was inspiring to me. And I might have read the article and wanted to talk about it, but I didn't necessarily agree with everything on it. I might have just shared the parts that I agreed with and then basically talked about what I would do that would be different. I covered all my bases, but it became a conversation. And I got better as I went. And I think what happens with a lot of people is they get stuck because they want everything to be perfect before they start. And a lot of that can come from worrying about what other people are going to think or how they look. But it doesn't have to be perfect the first time. What's important is that you do something and you make progress. Good enough is important. Good enough when you start is okay, because you can tweak it as you go. You can learn and become more efficient, get better at what you're doing. Something isn't wrong just because it wasn't perfect the first time. What are we actually afraid of? This is what I think we have to look at and what we call difficult. But a lot of difficulty is actually just perception. Someone can see where they go wrong, but inside they're thinking, I'm not ready, I'm not capable of doing this, I'm not equipped, I don't have enough, I'm not enough. What are people going to say? And now whatever is in front of them feels difficult. They call this imposter syndrome. But is the thing actually difficult, or are we assuming that? Are we making it difficult? Is everything we're carrying into it making it feel that way? That's something I work through with people. What's exactly making this seem so hard for you? What's actually happening, and what are the facts around it? What's the truth about it? What are we assuming? What are we afraid of? What is the real risk, and what's only a possible risk? What's coming from the situation, and what's coming from something that happened 10 years ago? Because if we can remove what a person perceives, we can remove what we thought was an enormous problem. It can simplify it. And that's why I talk about perceived problems. A problem is partly our perception of what's happening. And we're going to respond to that perception. So before we start trying to solve something, we need to make sure we're seeing it correctly. This is another place where we get into trouble. We all have biases. I probably have some too. And the question is whether I'm holding on to them so tightly that I can't see anything else. You know, we're living in a world right now where people can find out someone's political affiliation, for example, and decide whether they're going to listen to anything that person has to say before the person says it. And this isn't about left or right. It's about bias. If I've already decided what something means because the category I've put it in, I'm not really seeking truth anymore. I'm defending what I already believe. And it's not good, especially if what we already believe isn't working. I think that's where humility comes in. I have to really want to know what's true, even if it means finding out I was wrong. I don't have to be right. I want to do what's right. Those are two different things. And I think character really matters here. What's my motive? Am I hiding something? Am I trying to prove something? Am I trying to protect my ego? Or do I generally want to understand what's true? Because ultimately, that's what I'm trying to get to, understanding. Not just bias on how I'm feeling right now, on somebody else's opinion. I want to see the bigger picture. Sometimes we can't see what's right in front of us, and I believe the answer is often right there. The question is, can we see it? recently when I was helping someone with a situation involving their work. We needed to put together information showing the time they had spent on a project and some of the communication that had happened around it. I was using AI to help me organize it, and something that probably should have taken 30 minutes turned into hours. And to be honest, I got frustrated because this person I was helping needed it by a certain time and they were coming back and I really wanted to help them. So I finally said, okay, the best thing I can do right now is to stop. Because I've learned something about myself. When I'm stressed and I've lost my peace, pushing harder doesn't make it better. So I took a drive. I started speaking some affirmations over myself. Things like, you're smart, you have a good mind, there's an answer here. And I had to get myself out of that negative state I was in. And eventually I just humbled myself and said, I know there's a better way and I need to see it. And I just prayed, Lord, show me. And while I was driving home, the answer came to me. It was simple. And I was able to solve the problem. And that's what I mean when I say sometimes the answer is already there. I couldn't see it because of the state I was in. And I believe there's a supernatural aspect to this. And I don't believe everything comes from our own intellect. I use my mind. I want information. I ask questions, look at facts and things, and I think things through. But I don't believe my mind is the highest source of everything that I need to know. For me, this comes back to my relationship with God. Sometimes I have to stop trying to figure everything out and ask, what is actually true here? What am I not seeing? And realize that the most important state would be me being in peace. I've talked about this in another video about how we have defaults, and we all have them. They're patterns practiced long enough that we automatically go back to them. And for some people, worry becomes their default. Fear becomes their default. Trying to control everything becomes their default. And taking responsibility for everybody becomes a default. Trying to figure everything out becomes a default. But we can know better and still fall back into these patterns because we've practiced them for so long. I've learned to recognize when I'm doing that. For me, peace is very important. And I'm not trying to manufacture peace. I have peace already in me, and so do you. A lot of the things that we're trying to access that we need to actually solve the problems in our life, we already have. The question is whether we're living from it, we're accessing it. And this isn't a place where I arrive one day and never have another problem. It has to become a lifestyle. Because I still get frustrated. I still have things happen. I still have decisions to make and things that don't go according to my plans. But I've learned to recognize them much faster when I've moved into fear or worry or frustration. And I know how to come back. I know how to recover myself. You know, we hear about recovery all the time. People are in recovery. Well, the truth is we're all recovering our life because the truth about our life is already there. Can we see it and can we access it? That's part of what I mean when I talk about a state of being. I don't want to make an important decision from fear. I don't want to make it because I'm angry or exhausted or somebody's pressuring me. I want to get back to a state of peace so that I can see what I'm trying to do. And I'm not just deciding, I'm discerning. This is where stewardship has become so important to me. I don't look at my life as everything is mine and I have to figure out what I'm going to do with it. It's been entrusted to me. My gifts had been entrusted to me. My relationships have been entrusted to me. My finances, my time, my opportunities, the people I'm able to help. And when I look at it that way, the question changes. I'm not just deciding what I want to do. I'm discerning what I'm responsible for, what is actually mine to do, and can I be trusted with it? That's a question I ask myself. Can I be trusted to do what's right with what I've been given? Because I believe we're accountable for what we know. We're going to make mistakes. I've made plenty of them. There's mercy for that. But knowingly doing something we know isn't right is different. So I'm not trying to control my life. I'm trying to steward it because not everything belongs on my plate. People carrying things all the time that aren't theirs. And then they're exhausted. They're overwhelmed. They're trying to figure out how to manage all of it. And sometimes the question isn't how do we manage all this better? It's Is this really all mine to manage? What are we actually responsible for? What are you doing because you think you should? Because somebody expects you to? And what are you actually supposed to be doing? I've learned that I don't do anything unless there's grace for me to do it. What do I mean by that? I describe grace as a divine enablement to do what I cannot do on my own. It's like something helps me supernaturally. And I've thought a lot about that. Why would I be divinely enabled to do something that isn't aligned with the divine itself? There have been things in my life that other people might have considered hard. For instance, I wrote and recorded 2 original CDs. I built a radio show, started a radio station, created programs, ran businesses, wrote guides and books, did tons of teachings, created courses. I'm not saying I didn't work. I worked, but it wasn't working entirely for my own effort and strength. There was a grace for it. And I think there's a difference between work and toil. Work is working from something that we have, that we've been prepared for, and toil is trying to keep up with the Joneses and do everything in our own strength, even though it might not be the right place or the right thing for us at all. We need to understand what's the purpose, calling, or assignment. I wrote a book about this called Assignment ID. And the way I described it is that purpose doesn't change. I believe we all have the same ultimate purpose, which is to expand God's kingdom in the earth by loving Him and loving others. Calling is more about how our unique gifts, skills, and talents manifest through us. That can mean vocation, what we're gifted to do. And that increases by the reason of use. And the assignment is what we're meant to be doing right now. And that can change depending on the season we're in, based on the purpose and calling. So, for example, teaching and communication have shown up throughout my life in completely different ways. I've communicated through music, through radio, teaching classes. I've done trainings, writing, working with people one-on-one and in groups. And the expression of it has changed, but the underlying gifts haven't. They've just increased as I've used them. And that's why I think people get confused when they're trying to find this one thing they're supposed to do for the rest of their life. I've had many assignments, and I've learned that an assignment is something we get to do, not something we have to do. It should empower us. It shouldn't continually make us weary and burn us out because we're trying to be somebody we're not, carrying something that isn't ours. You don't have to figure it out alone. This is also why I think it's important to have people in our lives who can help us see, especially for leaders, executives, business owners, entrepreneurs, people who carry a lot of responsibility and are often people that everyone else goes to. Because when they're the one that doesn't know what to do, they can think, I should be able to figure this out. Why can't I solve this? I don't want anyone to know what I'm struggling with. But sometimes we're simply too close to the situation and we're standing inside the problem. And this is a lot of what I do with people. If someone's trying to decide whether to leave a job, start a business, make an investment, deal with a relationship, or make some other significant decision, I help them learn how to see the process for themselves. What's actually happening? What are we assuming? What's the real risks? What are the perceived ones? What are your values and priorities here? And what season of life are you in? Are you still working in an old one? What are you responsible for? How does this decision affect your finances, your relationships, your health and well-being? What happens if they do? What happens if they don't? And here's a question I ask a lot. If my decision creates other problems for me and other people, is this really a solution? We're trying to see the whole picture here. Because the immediate decision is important, but I'm also helping people learn how to do this for themselves. It's a skill they need to learn. I want them to build confidence that they can see. I don't want somebody leaving saying, she told me what to do, and I want them to understand why they're making a decision. And that's a skill. We have to see for ourselves. And I think this goes even deeper than decision making. A lot of people are really hard on themselves. They've been corrected by people who have humiliated or shamed them. They've been made to feel like something is wrong with them. And then we tell them to think positive and believe in yourself, that you're valuable. But somebody telling them they're valuable doesn't necessarily change what they believe about themselves. They have to see it. That's why truth is so important to me. It's supposed to set us free. And I've watched that happen with myself and with those that I help. I'm not trying to convince people that they're wonderful. I want them to see who they actually are. And their identity begins in who the Creator made them. I personally don't know who I am until I knew who He was. I'm made in His image and likeness. A lot of people have walls up. They've been hurt. They don't trust people. So trusting God can become a difficult thing too. Sometimes I just have to love people where they are. And I think one of the greatest things we can do for another person is tell them the truth. Love tells the truth. Shame isn't love. People don't care what we know until they know that we care. And genuine care changes how people experience us and how they can receive from us. What does success actually look like? I've thought about that in different ways for a long time. The world's version can be, how much money do I have? How big's my business? How many people do I know? How popular am I? How many likes do I have and followers? How many things have I accumulated? That's not how I measure success. I think about success as faithfulness. Was I faithful in what I was given? Did I use my gifts and skills that were in my... Did I love the people that I was supposed to help? Did I help them to do what they were supposed to do? Did I help them finish and stay the course? Did I finish my course? And at the end of my life, I want to hear, well done, good and faithful servant. That's success to me. And I believe I have a successful life. I may not have the most money. I may not have the biggest audience, but I have a blessed marriage, 4 beautiful children who are adults. And I have grandchildren and wonderful relationships, great friendships. I have businesses. I have a ministry. I've been able to use my gifts. I've had enough to take care of my responsibilities and to be generous, to sow into things I believe in. Everything I put my hand to is blessed. And when I talk about being blessed, I'm not just talking about money. We can be rich in relationships, rich in wisdom, rich in understanding, rich in gifts and skills, rich in opportunities and differences we're able to make in people's lives. And yes, finances are a part of it too. But money alone isn't going to give somebody a blessed life. I know people with a lot of money who aren't happy. They don't know who they are. No amount of money is going to fix that. To me, we're blessed to be a blessing. Some of the most important things I've done aren't public. A lot of the work I do with people is very personal and confidential. And I don't expose people by posting all of that on the internet. I don't take somebody who's going through one of the hardest things in their life and think, how can I turn this into a marketing thing? My private meetings are private because people need to be able to trust me. That's part of stewardship. If somebody trusts me with something vulnerable, I need to be trustworthy with it. Are you? There are people I've worked with for years. Some of those relationships have become lifelong. There may never be a post. There may never be a testimonial explaining the details. And that's okay. Being publicly visible and actually impacting lives aren't the same thing. Sometimes faithfulness means doing something important that almost nobody else will ever know you did. A couple of years ago, I went through a period where I was in and out of the hospitals. I had 3 surgeries, Lyme disease, even a back injury. I was sedentary for close to 2 years. I got to the point where I was losing strength in my legs and having pain in them. And I wasn't working during those 2 years, so I wasn't generating new income through my work. But thank God, He still took care of me. While I was in the hospital, I was still me, sharing a room with a woman. I was able to help her and her son figure out how to get her home because he lived out of town. In another hospital, I was able to encourage some of the nurses who were going through things. And at one point, I ended up in 3 different hospitals because they kept moving me. I spent about 10 days in one of them waiting to get into another hospital that could do a procedure that I needed. And I probably never should have been moved there because they couldn't do what I needed. But I remember thinking, okay, if this is where I am, what is it that I need to be here for? And through that process, there were specialists and doctors that kept coming in to see me. They realized they weren't trained to do the procedure they needed to do. And because of what happened, they decided they were going to start training their people so they could do it, all because I was there. Things happen for a reason. The next person that comes in with the issue I had won't have to go through what I did. Because that procedure was experimental, and now I'm part of a study where they're following how I'm doing. And it's going to help a lot of people. I didn't orchestrate any of that. I couldn't have planned it, but even in that season, that was incredibly difficult. I could still be a blessing. My pain could become somebody else's victory. And that's what I mean when I say I've lived a blessed life. It doesn't mean nothing difficult happens. It means the difficult thing doesn't determine who I am, and it doesn't keep me from being who I am regardless of what happened to me. I've learned how to faint not, I guess you could say. We all face difficult situations. The question isn't whether we're going to deal with things. The question becomes, how long do we have to stay in them? I've learned how to collapse time solving problems. Something that could have consumed me for weeks, months, even years doesn't necessarily have to anymore. That doesn't mean every problem disappears immediately. It means I've learned how to process things differently. I've learned how to recognize when I'm operating in fear or worry, or if I'm making assumptions, when I lose my peace, trying to carry something that isn't mine. When I'm trying to figure things out, I've learned how to get back to what's true. We're not supposed to grow weary in well-doing, because we will reap if we faint not. And I think I've learned how to faint not. Being content, whether I have a little or whether I have a lot. That's something we need to learn when things aren't going our way. It's not a place that we arrive. It's a way of living. And I've been through the testing. I've had enormous medical debt, upwards in the millions of dollars over the years, and had seasons where I couldn't work. Things happened that couldn't have planned for. But in all of it, I know I'm not done yet. When I look back over my life, I've been able to do so many amazing things that if someone had done one of them might consider themselves incredibly blessed. But I don't look at those things and think, look at how great I am. I look at them and I think, how did I get to do all this? It comes down to humility, knowing I'm not relying on myself, that I need help, that either God himself or he'll send someone to help me. That supernatural aspect of my life is important. And at the same time, I'm not diminishing the gifts he's given me. I've learned to use them, and that's important too. A lot of people have gifts they never use. They never live their full potential because they're afraid. They don't know where to use them. They don't know how. They don't think they're ready. They compare themselves to everybody else doing it, and they bury what they've been given. I don't want to do that. I don't think you want to either. I don't want you to get to the end of your life having never used what was in you. Instead of dying with those gifts and capabilities inside you, what if you could actually live? What if you could actually live your life that's blessed beyond what you could ask or think? In spite of what goes wrong, it has nothing to do with who has the most money. If you have the gifts, you can afford it. The provision will be there. Not because everybody else knows our name, but because we're faithful with what we're given. There's a scripture that talks about if you're faithful in the little, you'll be given charge over much. So if we love people, we use our gifts. We make a difference where we belong. We stop trying to be somebody else. And we've learned how to live from peace instead of fear, from faith instead of worry, and from confidence that we don't have to do everything on our own. That's what I've learned how to do. And I don't think I'm done yet. I still believe there's so much more that I can do, and I don't know what it all looks like, and that's part of the adventure. And I don't need to. If there's one thing I want to leave with you, it's this: stop trying to figure everything out. You don't need the whole plan to get your ducks in a row or to have all the money to fund everything. Just see what's true. Know what's actually yours to do and have confidence to take the next step. And if you need someone to help you process that, you can apply to work with me.